We've spent the past few modules talking about hazards in foods. Hazards, of course, are things in foods that can cause harm to a consumer, and they could be biological, chemical, or physical in nature. Now, the more you think about these hazards, the more you realize they're not all created equal. Some hazards are going to have a much bigger impact on human health, and in some cases could even kill people. And in other cases, hazards could happen far more frequently, almost on a daily basis, or they could be very infrequent. And when we start to combine these aspects of how much impact and how frequently or how prevalent the hazard is, we're starting to calculate the risk of a hazard. This is important because once we start identifying hazards in food systems, we could have tens, if not hundreds, of hazards in different food systems. And we need to prioritize our attention on the ones that are going to have the most impact and keep refocusing that attention so that we're minimizing impact as much as possible. So let's jump to the PowerPoint so we can start calculating the risk of different hazards. So in this video, we are going to use matrices to define level of risk of different hazards in foods. And at the end of this video, you will be able to define the risk as a measure of the severity of a hazard and the prevalence of a hazard. You'll appreciate the dimensions of severity and prevalence. We'll use a risk matrix for estimating the risk level in a range of scenarios related to agroprocessing, and we will identify where risk categories are used in HACCP and preventive control programs. So let's jump forward here. Risk, as we alluded to in the introduction, is a function of severity of a hazard multiplied by the prevalence of a hazard, or how frequently that hazard could be occurring. And so we've talked about that from a few different scenarios, that some hazards could cause quite substantial harm to a consumer. In some cases, could even cause death to a consumer. And some hazards, they happen quite frequently. They could be happening almost on a daily basis. And in other cases, they could happen extremely infrequently. We need to prioritize based off of a combination of these different factors so that we know where to pay attention. And again, our ultimate goal is we want to reduce risk to a level as low as realistically possible. You will never hear a HACCP coordinator or a risk assessor say we have zero risk. There's always going to be some theoretical risk that's there, but we are going to do our best and we are going to try as much as possible to reduce the risks and make it realistic. So we need to put emphasis where it's needed. Some hazards are very frequent, but they have low impact. And in other cases, we could have infrequent but devastating impact hazards. How do we know which one's more important? Well, let's jump forward. First off, we need to think about the severity. This is where we're thinking about the impact of a hazard and its potential impact on human health. So in some cases, the severity could be negligible. It could cause minor illness, loss of trust in the product. Reputation loss is one thing that's important to think about. Will people go on social media and start complaining about finding pieces of plastic in their food? There's no real likely harm from the pieces of plastic, but people will lose trust in your food safety program. Moving up to minor, this is where you may require some medical treatment. It could cause temporary impairment or illness. Moderate could imply that some people may require hospitalization, but they're most likely to recover. Major could cause hospitalization and extended hospitalization, or could cause long-term impairment. And extreme, of course, is potential fatality or death. And there are hazards such as certain allergens or certain pathogens that can cause death if we do not mitigate them and reduce them properly. Prevalence is how we're talking about the frequency. How often does a hazard occur? And so rare is, it's probably unlikely to happen, but there's a small but theoretical chance it could. And in other cases, things could be unlikely. So it's not going to happen under normal operations if things are going correctly. And it's possible, could happen sometimes, likely, implying that it could happen routinely, and then almost certain it's going to happen almost all the time under normal circumstances. And so we use these two in combination with each other. What has been used by the food safety community is what we call this matrix. And so we usually have along one axis or one direction of the matrix, we will use a severity or the impact factor. And then on the other matrix, or on the other direction, pardon me, you'll go up and down and use the opposite one. So in this case, we use prevalence. Now, I used a 5 point or 5 by 5 point scale, and you'll see different organizations use slightly different scales, or they may reverse the order and they'll put extreme and almost certain up on this corner. The main premise is the same, that we're using a multiplier to be able to go out and quickly calculate and estimate the risk of different hazards so that we can prioritize them. So what we do is we multiply the number that we've assigned here. Negligible, we gave a 1, and rare, we gave a 1, up to almost certain, we gave a 5, and extreme, we gave a 5, and we multiplied them. And so that gives us a numeric factor that allows us to predict the risk and allocate some sort of priority to it. And then what we often see is that organizations will allocate a color coding. Now, I used a 3-stage color coding framework here. I decided that any number that was below 5 would be low, any number that was between 5 and 15 would be medium, and anything above 15 would be high. Now, again, you'll see different organizations use slightly different categorizations. Some of them will have 4, some of them will have 5. Main thing is that we are giving a priority to the most impactful, and we are quickly color coding it so that we can then determine, is it low, medium, or high. Now let's go through a couple examples just so we get a sense of how we might do this. So let's say we're making yogurt from fresh goat's milk, and we obtained that from our farm goats, and we did a risk assessment, and we reviewed the literature, and we connected with different farm agencies or government sources, and that risk assessment suggests that E. coli, Salmonella, and Staphylococcus bacteria are going to be reasonably common in unpasteurized milk. These are all pathogens that can cause substantial illness, and in the case of E. coli, if it's one of the hemolytic types of E. coli, it could cause death. So we do want to make sure that we are not just reverting to the lowest risk in our risk categorization, but we're looking at the highest risk. So based off of this, it is reasonably common and it could cause death. So where are we going to put this in our matrix? Well, so let's say it is reasonably common. So do I have a pen here? Oh, I think I do. So we're going to say it's likely, and it is extreme, because if it's a hemolytic E. coli, that's going to put us down. Oh, the pen's the same color as the red color, but this is going to put us down in the 20 category. And so this is going to be a high risk that we need to be concerned about. And again, is there a fast and hard science? No, but we need to use our best hypothesis and our best educated guess to categorize where these are. Now let's do a second example here. Let's say we're making goat's milk yogurt, and now we're buying milk that has been pasteurized at a dairy plant, and that dairy plant is inspected by the public health unit. And the hazard analysis is, goat's milk, it could contain Salmonella, E. coli, and Staphylococcus. However, what's different is now we have a pasteurization step, and we are receiving this product in from a company that is doing the pasteurization for us. So when it's done correctly, it's designed to eliminate those pathogens from the product. So let's jump out to our risk matrix again. So what is the severity? Well, the severity, again, we are labeling those bacteria, and the severity is extreme. However, because we are getting our product from a pasteurized a plant that's doing pasteurization for us, we're likely in this rare to unlikely category. And so this is going to put our hazard in the medium to low category. And so let's say it's rare. Maybe our pasteurizer is extremely well certified. They've got an SQF or BRC certification, and they're able to provide certificates of process validation each time. So we can put this in a much lower category because we have applied certain process controls. Let's do one more example. So let's say we're storing our bags of sugar and salt on wooden pallets, and hazard analysis suggests wooden pallets can cause physical contamination. Maybe if we are using forklifts or pallet trucks to move the pallets around, there's a potential of us chipping the wood and some of the splinters getting pushed into the bag. And now, while wood is not pleasant to find, it's pretty unlikely it's going to cause harm, but the harm is to the reputation of the company. There is a potential that someone could get a large piece of wood and choke on it, but um, hopefully, if it's that large, someone in quality assurance or in operations would see it. Versus small chips of wood are not. They're more likely to pass through the product. So it is. If we're using wooden pallets, it is possible to have those wooden pellets get chipped and those chips ending up impaling different bags. But the harm is going to be likely negligible. And so, again, this risk categorization is low. Now, does that mean it's not important to pay attention to? Absolutely. But let's say we're at a yogurt plant and we have sugar bags coming in and we also have pasteurization. We should be paying a lot more attention to the pasteurization of our milk. And yes, we still need to pay attention to the pellets and the potential for wood splinters, but maybe we're not going to pay attention as frequently. And maybe we don't need to monitor this every single day on every single lot of product. So why does this matter? Well, it helps us prioritize which hazards we need to pay attention to because within our HACCP plan, we are going to start to identify all sorts of hazards and many of them are going to be low risk. And so it's not that we shouldn't be concerned about those low risk hazards, but we're going to pay the most attention in the high risk hazards and make sure that we apply at least one, if not multiple process controls to keep that hazard from causing harm. It is part of the decision-making tree, and we will jump into doing the decision-making tree for HACCP, and we'll have some fun discovering the different forms and the different document management systems that are available. And again, this is really important because you're going to have a lot of hazards that you're going to identify, and you need to know what to pay attention to. And so this quickly helps you figure out that. So I'll leave you with some photos of some of our friends from the SAGE program. These are some of our friends at Heart Trust at Ebony Park Academy making sauce, and it's just great to see so many happy, smiling faces.